So, Sigourney, at what point did you and Jim first discuss the idea of you playing an important role in The Way of Water and the subsequent Avatar sequels?
So, in 2010, Jim and I had lunch in Los Angeles, in part to discuss how one might create a character of a girl who is a young girl, who had some sort of relationship with Grace Augustine, who I played in the first one. And it was clear that she was very comfortable in the forest, felt more at home there than she did with, any kind of people's community. Was sort of a wild child. I didn't know anything about the boy character that Jim would create later, the human boy that becomes her best friend. But that is a wonderful addition. I was thrilled, excited, and somewhat terrified by the prospect.
How did he initially describe the character of Kiri, and what most intrigued you about the role?
I think that he described her, well, we talked about these ideas that became more rounded out, but I think that, she doesn't know her true identity. Nobody seems to, and that is a very unsettling aspect of her life. She's adopted, so that's another difficult part. So she's one of those people who's very secure in certain ways and kind of lost in other ways, which I think is true of a lot of people's adolescence. So I think that there's a great deal of honesty in that, and I'm just so impressed that Jim can write a character like Kiri who's so special, so gentle, and also so ferocious when she has to be.
Did you have any trepidation around the idea of playing a 14-year-old girl, and how did you prepare for something like that?
Well, of course, I felt he was entrusting me with a huge responsibility, and that he might decide he was crazy. But I knew I didn't want to play a 14-year-old. I wanted to be a 14-year-old, and I wanted to be Kiri, a specific 14-year-old. And for that, I had to sort of unearth my 14-year-old and start to weave them together. And I found, the voice from hanging out in some classes in a high school in New York. And so luckily I had the time, because we kept being postponed, that I could sort of build. And so I think there was a lot I could identify with, the love of nature and love of creatures. And, inadvertently I became that comfortable in the water, even though, what I remember in the water growing up was there were always these horseshoe crabs, which are like these really primitive looking things that were always like scuttling along. So there are more beautiful things in the water in Pandora, of course.
How would you characterize Kiri's relationship to the other children in the story?
Well, I think Jim's family, he had several children who were around these ages, and he wanted to bring their real reality of, the put downs and the sarcasm and all of that in our world of the children. And so I think he wrote them really beautifully. So you see us giving each other grief, but at the same time you see that we'll do anything for each other. And that's what a family is.
How did you find the experience of working with the younger cast? And was there a lot of mentoring happening on set?
Well, I loved working with the kids, and I was always grateful to them because they immediately accepted me as a 14-year-old. I think they all got a medal for that. And I was particularly close to Trinity, who played my little sister, because Kiri and Took are very close. And then, Jack Champion plays Spider, who's my best friend. But I would never directly mentor anyone. I think that it was if I mentor at all, because I've been in the business for so long, I come from the theater, so I was inadvertently mentored to be on time, to be prepared, to know my lines, to take it very seriously, still have fun, all those things. And so in that sense, I think I was a very stabilizing influence to be in that group. All the kids did great, and they're each such individuals, and they all had very strong parents. So I didn't ever feel, I think probably I'll continue to be good friends with Trinity, and I think we will stay in touch, and if she has any questions that I can be helpful with, I'll certainly, share with her.
With Neytiri, Kiri, and Ronald, we're seeing more compelling female characters in the Avatar universe. Could you speak to the way Jim foregrounds strong women in his storytelling?
I think Jim loves women, thinks of women as very strong. I mean, he created the, more extended Ripley, But I think Ronald is a very powerful character. A very upfront character who doesn't want us there. Neytiri is strong because she's so vulnerable and yet does what she needs to do. And I think that he was delighted to add more women characters. He's so good at creating characters. He must somehow have all these other kinds of women in his life. He's very close to his mother and his family, and his family as a father, and I think he put all those different colors in these relationships for real.
What training did you undergo to perform the underwater performance capture, and what was that experience like acting underwater?
Well, one of the things you noticed when you read the script was that a good 75% of it seemed to be underwater. And luckily, Jim never asks you to do something that he doesn't make sure you can be ready for. So he hired an extraordinary teacher, Kurt Crack, to sort of teach us the elements of free diving, how to hold our breath, how to work underwater so that our faces were relaxed and it looked like our element. And so, it took us a number of months, a year really, to get to the point where we could shoot. And we needed that time. And when I watch the movie, I can see that we are comfortable underwater. It is our element. So Jim's direction worked, Perfect.
How would you describe your on-set relationship with Jim at this point, given that you've known each other for so long and have worked together often?
It's very playful. We tease each other. And he had this desk on the side that was called Jim's desk, and it was covered with a piece of paper, and it said Jim's desk on it, only his stuff. And you're often over there talking to Jim right by the screen where you can sort of see a roughed out version of what's going on. And I put my coffee cup down one day and he said, "This is my desk." And I said, "You know what? You have all this space. I'm going to just take a corner for myself." And I took a crayon and I made a kind of square. And I said, "This is my space. And if I have a cup, I can put it down on this space." So I think we give as good as we get.
What sets New Zealand, the country, apart from other filmmaking locations?
Well, it's such an extraordinarily beautiful country. I did all my performance capture on an empty set in Manhattan Beach. So I only went to New Zealand we shot a little bit of 4 there that I was in. And so I think what's great is it has a really good crews, a whole film community, a filmmaking community that's very hardworking and lovely, lovely scenery for Lord of the Rings and all these different hobbity things. But I don't think we've ever taken advantage of it because, of course, Pandora is all done at Weta Digital, and it's a make-believe world. So we're probably the only film that's gone to New Zealand without wanting to shoot the mountains and the forests and the oceans.
And another one about New Zealand. Can you describe what it's like working in New Zealand and working with the New Zealand crew?
Well, I loved working in New Zealand. The people are great. They're very hardy people. They sort of just really do their jobs in sometimes extremely onerous conditions. You know, I met a lot of the stunt guys who played the dwarves in various Lord of the Rings, and they were always having to be flown by helicopter from one mountaintop to another, wearing these huge dwarf suits, you know, and beards and wigs and fake noses and everything. And they're just such a great group of people. They're so funny. You know, they don't take it too seriously, but they work hard.
And the last one, amid all the grand spectacle of The Way of Water, the central core of the story is really centered around family. Was that something that resonated with you personally?
Well, I think family resonates for everyone, whether you're close to your family or not close to your family. As soon as the movie starts, you are just brought into that family. You become part of the family for the whole 2+ hours, and this emotional story is the family story, and he's written it. Jim Cameron has written it so beautifully. Every character is so well defined and so well played. I think it's got an amazing cast, and to me, that's why. The main reason why the movie works so well. It's also dazzling and seamless in the way it's executed, but you're there because you love this family, and you go with them on these adventures, some of which they don't really want. But I think that you feel for them and you want to root for them.